Somebody brought to my attention that there was a bit of a heated debate going on between Jeremy of Build a Soil and Tad from Kis Organics. Jeremy from Build a Soil made a post on Instagram going over soil inputs, making the claim that some inputs, based on the way that they're derived, are not ethically sustainable within your soil buildup. Build a Soil says, think your soil is clean because it's labeled, quote, organic? You might want to look a little closer or deeper. In part 2 of our 3-part series, we're digging into the truth behind common inputs found in many potting soils, even those approved for organic use, and why they might not belong in real living soil. We're talking about ingredients that come from questionable sources, contribute to long-term soil issues, or simply don't support the biology you're trying to build. And they direct you to your website, or to their website for more information. And Tad from Kis Organics comments just underneath and just says, you know, hey, based on permaculture principles, the usage of slaughterhouse byproducts is a highest use case for sustainability, not defending the ethics of the meat industry. Research shows that fertilizers like bone meal and blood meal are significantly cleaner than ocean-based inputs. And let's face it, industrial fishing is not good either, but the same principle of highest use case applies. Lower heavy metals, non-detectable for herbicides, pesticides, and most PFAS compared to fish meal and fish bone meal. So essentially what Tad's saying here is, well, wait a second, it would suggest through permaculture principles that actually the waste from the byproducts of a slaughterhouse can be used sustainably without justifying the meat industry. You can still use this material without it being bad, or else it's just going to waste anyways. Jeremy responds, at Kis Organics, this one has really bothered you since day one. Maybe if you actually smoked weed, you would get over it. We make a lot of soil not mixed by another company, so that means we must buy all the amendments direct, and I don't want to spend hundreds of thousands on amendments that are cheap and the same as everybody else, and come from graping the earth with thousands of acres of Roundup, sprayed crops to produce them, not getting crops that came in contact with Roundup, then fed back through animal cruelty. Listen, I know I'm a hypocrite, but I've said this since day one, and some people do care to know. Slight dig at the fact that Tad isn't a big smoker, but then essentially says, you know, sits down on his principle and disagrees. Tad responds, personal attacks aside, let's look at facts. Is there a higher use for bone meal and blood meal? This is Permaculture 101. Is it indeed, quote unquote, dirty, like you claim? It's a great marketing message, but the science doesn't seem to support it. Blood and bone meal are cleaner than ocean-based inputs when it comes to heavy metals and other contaminants, based on all the research I've seen, as well as all the independent heavy metal testing we've done, which you can view on our website. If you have any data to support your claims, it would be great for you to publish it. You have a great platform and reach a lot of growers. I hope you will use that influence to promote accurate information. Jeremy responds one more time, says, dirty as in it's dirty because of all the cruelty. Also, it's not just blood and bone of which we don't use. The poultry litter from some local places is dirty, and it's impossible to test everything. We just prefer to use seed meals and other inputs. The worst heavy metal offenders I've seen have been minerals. The remarks weren't a personal attack. I just don't think you have ever been a weed smoker, and it's strange that you teach specifically to those that do. To me, it would feel disingenuous, similar to me teaching jujitsu to anyone if I have never rolled. Just talked to all the black belts and discussed fighting. I also don't think it's personal attack to mention most all soil companies have another company mixing their soil. Look, I know where you stand on these inputs, and I disagree. I'm not the science podcast guy. I just teach what I teach, and I'll be doing it as long as I can. These things matter to me, and they matter to some others. And so this conversation actually goes back and forth, and it's actually, I encourage you to go and check it out. This is under Build a Soil's post from about 7 days ago. It's right there. It's from a week ago, and it's under what's real in your soil. The only real reason I wanted to touch on this is because what you have here is a discussion between two grown-ass men in regards to both of their passions of soil sustainability and reasonable methods to source it. The problem that I have is that Jeremy kind of says that this is not open to discussion, and I don't believe I read that here. He actually responds to Tad's video that I'll show in just a minute, where he challenges Jeremy to a conversation or a debate. And Jeremy essentially says he's not open to debate. Jeremy suggests that Tad simply doesn't have the credentials to comment on this because he doesn't smoke weed. That's not fair. Tad is looking at this from a scientific perspective with research and studies to prove it. And that's what he teaches. And that's what his method simply is. And it's very valuable to the space, whether he smokes or not. I think in some sense, someone who's never rolled on a jiu-jitsu mat can sit and talk to black belts, but there's going to be parts of the conversation that they simply won't understand. In the same way that a smoker or a non-smoker would not understand the particular effects of weed. Nobody is just out of the conversation simply because they don't smoke or they don't roll. If anything, we should be open to conversation. We should be willing to see the other perspective and then make a rational choice. It's okay if you've already considered this and made your decision, but I think it's very important that we have this discussion so that everybody can learn. Why not open this up to the masses so the masses can then decide either A or B and then go from there? So this is just a conversation between two grown-ass men. I don't think that I've been following Jeremy for a very, very long time. I was actually following Jeremy long before I was on YouTube. When I was a blogger, I seen his formula and his product making its way through the internet and through growers everywhere, and I was quite fascinated by that. And I don't think that Jeremy is a bad guy. I don't think he's trying to attack anyone. I just simply think that he was trying to brush off the argument by referring to Tad as a non-smoker. But I just don't think that's valid, and I do think there should be a place to have a conversation. And this is kind of what Tad said in his video, and the video it says this.
So recently I got into a conversation with Jeremy from Build a Soil about using meat industry byproducts, things like blood, bone, and feather meal, as fertilizers. Their position is that these inputs should not be used because they come from an industry with serious animal cruelty issues. Now, my position is different. Data shows that these byproducts are safe, effective, and clean, and actually the highest use for those waste streams. From a permaculture perspective, reusing them is the most sustainable thing that we can do. And to Build a Soil, this is an open invitation. Let's move beyond the comment threads and have a real discussion. Whether it's on my podcast, a YouTube Live, or another platform, I'd love to dive deeper into the science. Let's talk about bone and blood meal versus ocean-based fertilizers that you prefer. Let's talk about heavy metals, indoor cultivation in relation to cover cropping and mulches, chop and drop, and other cultivation practices. And to everyone else, I want to hear your perspective.
The thing is like, Grab It Hard says the topic doesn't matter. I'll always use blood and bone meal. I think the topic does matter. I think the topic does matter, and that would be why I think it's important to have these conversations, so that people can make a reasonable decision based on the facts.